I don't know how many of you have experimented with making your own body butter or lotions, but ever since I started making mine, I am so in love with it. I just use a little bit and it lasts and I can grip and it just is great. So look me up on my website if you feel like you want to buy some. Okay, enough of that. I'm working on the calves today, so specifically the gastrocs and the soleus, and I think the most important thing about working in this area is recognizing the connection from the upper leg through this area that we're focused on all the way down to the bottom of the foot and to the toes. When the gastrocs and the soleus get really tight, it can pull on the attachment at the calcaneus. So one of the first things I like to do is make sure that I loosen that attachment site so that when I start to do the more specific work into the belly of the calf muscles, that's not going to pull so deeply at the heel and through the bottom of the foot. When I'm working on the posterior lower leg, there are 3 layers that I'm conscious of while I'm working. One is the gastrocs, which is most superficial and mostly focused on in general. One is all the connective tissue that connects the gastrocs to the soleus and then wraps all the way down to the plantar fascia and can be loosened up so thoroughly with some really good myofascial release. And then last but not least is the soleus, which I feel like is kind of the outlaw of the lower leg. Because the gastrocs cross over the knee but the soleus doesn't, a lot of those calves stretches we do more deeply affect the gastrocs, and that soleus stays stuck and holds on to a lot of that tension that has been building up for years. That being said, the first work that I'm going to do once I've really warmed up the lower leg is in the soleus. I'm holding onto my client's foot here with my left hand, creating traction, pulling down towards me, and as I sink down with my thumb, with my right hand, I'm just posterior to the peroneals and sinking into that thick, fibrous soleus that I often find so many trigger points in and so much tension in. Using my traction hand here a little differently, instead of pulling the foot down towards me, I'm pushing the plantar surface of the foot down, creating a little bit of a stretch. And as I sink down into both the gastrocs and the soleus, as I push the toes down towards the table or up towards the knee just a little bit, I'm creating a deeper stretch, and I'm using either a nice broad forearm or a sharp elbow, depending on what you feel like your client needs and how specific that muscle needs to be worked. The connective tissue that wraps around the gastrocs and the soleus and then bleeds down and eventually becomes the Achilles tendon can become very thick and can limit a lot of range of motion in the ankle, especially if there's been an injury to the Achilles tendon or either of those muscles in the lower leg. So what I'm doing here to address that is some very specific myofascial release. I'm using my thumb along the lateral and then the more posterior and then eventually the more medial aspect of the Achilles tendon, and as I sink down with my thumb, I'm using either a palm or a soft fist to push down into the foot and creating that deep stretch and loosening up that very stuck, very adhered connective tissue. A deeper, more intense version of that pin and stretch that addresses the entire lower leg has my client's knee fully extended so that there's no foot bolster and their foot is actually coming down off the bottom of the table so that I can manipulate what the foot does with my thigh. As I push into the bottom of their foot with my thigh, really emphasizing dorsiflexion, I'm stretching out the gastrocs and the soleus and then sinking in with either a soft fist or specific thumbs or fingers, or using a nice broad elbow or forearm. whatever tools I choose to use here, I don't want to forget the importance of detail in my work. What I mean by this is that I want to envision drawing lines from the ankle to the knee all along every part of these two muscles and all of that connective tissue from lateral to medial and everywhere in between, making sure that my work is very complete and anything that is affected is addressed. The lack of a foot bolster here also gives me a little more room to work more intensely into that connective tissue and all up into the lower leg. So I'm using my knee as a bolster instead, which gives me more room to move their foot into dorsiflexion and allows me to work more deeply as I slide up into those muscles and separate all of the fibers of the gastrocs and the soleus, and then allows me to really address the minutiae of every connection of all of that thick connective tissue. If I repeatedly point and flex my client's foot, it's also kind of like every new movement is a new layer of disconnect, is a new layer of separation. Good old petrissage is a beautiful thing, but slowing it down can offer you so much insight into what's going on a deep level for your client's muscles. With my knee still under my client's ankle, I'm able to use both my hands here to grab onto both the gastrocs and the soleus and pull them away from the posterior tibia. The purpose of this is twofold. One, I can create more freedom on the deeper levels of these muscles interacting with each other, and two, I can get a better sense of where these muscles might be more stuck for my client or less stuck, and where I can focus my energy a little more accurately. Moving down away from the muscle tissue and into the tendon itself, it's a little harder to grab and pull away. So instead of grabbing, I'm just going to create a vibration going all the way down into the calcaneus. It's quite apropos that the Achilles tendon was named after the Greek warrior who was invincible all except for this area of the body, because once this area is injured, it is not fun to rehab and can create so many problems. So if you're working with some deep scar tissue into this area, you want to dig deep and create a lot of new movement. What I'm doing here is using either my fingers or knuckles to push the Achilles tendon out laterally and pull the ankle in medially. So I'm moving the Achilles tendon out to the side in a way that it needs to be broken free from its underlying structures. If your client has had an Achilles tendon rupture or an injury in the gastrocs and the soleus down into the Achilles tendon, even if your client has plantar fasciitis, this work can really free up that flow of connective tissue and disrupt that stuck joint. Now that I've really unstuck a lot of what was stuck, I just want to do some nice long oppositional twists up the back of the leg, kind of my version of making nice down here, pulling up in one direction, pulling down in the other, making sure that that lower leg feels connected. Switching directions here, I'm focusing more on crowding the tissue down towards the heel, and what this does is start to retrain the ankle what it's supposed to do, especially if your client has limited dorsiflexion. As I sink in and push down towards the heel, I'm crowding all of that tissue down and guiding it through its movement that it should do, reminding it of its purpose. I want to take a second here and offer some tips on how to work the anterior soleus from the supine position. I've chosen this camera angle so you can really see what my thumb is doing. I've got my right hand cupped under their ankle, and with my arm I'm just leaning so that I'm creating dorsiflexion, and as I do that, I'm focused on the anterior soleus. I'm not digging up into the tibialis posterior, I'm sinking down towards the table, and my intention is on that thick underlying soleus muscle. This last technique helps to open up those top attachment sites of the gastrocs on either side of the femur. With their ankle and the top of their foot rested on my shoulder, I'm sliding down and then grasping onto their lower leg close to the knee and pulling towards me, which gives some nice tension onto the tibia and helps to release those more superior fibers of the gastrocs away from the knee joint. I can do this a couple times, but as I get close to the ankle, I'm just going to wrap my fingers around the ankle, bringing their attention up towards their foot, resting their leg back down onto the table, and completing my work.
Slightly. Go somewhere. You keep twisting my foot like
I know. I keep
doing
doing
else.